Welcome back to the Buddhist Psychology Podcast. I'm Lisa J.L. Miller. Excellent psychotherapy training imparts a rich set of skills for embarking on a successful therapeutic relationship with a new patient. Much of that training emphasizes creating a safe, therapeutic container where the patient feels heard and received with openness, curiosity, and interest. That process is crucial because replicated research has shown the main cause of successful patient outcomes is the quality of the therapeutic relationship, not any particular modality that is used. After getting acquainted, the therapeutic process moves into a middle stage therapy, structured around skills and insight acquisition. Though this stage varies in length, depending upon the severity of symptoms and issues, accomplishment requires a willing patient and a capable psychotherapist teaming up to achieve the patient's therapeutic goals. Because psychotherapy is primarily a relational undertaking, ending a therapeutic engagement is definitely not a standardized process. Most of the training psychotherapists receive about ending therapy primarily targets the legal and ethical issues of patient termination. Whether brief or longer term, knowing whether a given therapeutic process is coming to an end is surprisingly easy. Yet many patients feel uncomfortable about discussing ending therapy, and that requires psychotherapists to go beyond any discomfort we may have about endings and discussing them. In a time where ghosting is so commonplace it's almost socially sanctioned, I remain a big fan of intentional endings. So, what makes an ending intentional? Several things. First and foremost, openly discussing termination as soon as there is any hint that it might be on the table. Doing so undercuts any unclarity or doubt about what constitutes successful completion and what could be avoidance of doing challenging therapeutic work. Once there is shared acknowledgement of a job well done, I offer a question for the patient to contemplate. If you, the person you are now, with all the changes you have accomplished, were to begin therapy today, what, if anything, would you be working on? Then I insist they work with the question until the next session. This method cultivates autonomy and empowers a patient to chart their own course and not rely on someone else to tell them if they're done. It also promotes inner trust and confidence in their capacity for wise knowing. The answers I've received over the years to this question have been varied, like, "There's nothing I would work on." This is not only a valid answer, but a key indicator of successful completion. In this case, intentional ending means making space to hear all about how that answer was discerned. And I have yet to disagree when that is a patient's choice. Other examples are, "I'm now ready to work on XYZ," or "I'm not sure there's any other issue, but I'm not ready to stop our sessions." Both are also valid answers. The first one requires quite a bit of inquiry with the patient about how completing the work has made it possible for them to consider now working with an issue that's usually deeper or more challenging than what they initially came to therapy for. This happy event for therapist and patient can be demarcated with an intentional ending of the completed body of work and structuring a treatment plan for moving forward. Not being ready to end, even though the symptoms and issues have been resolved, signals a relational attachment which needs an intentional ending. That can look like several sessions focused solely on unwinding the therapeutic container and therapeutic relationship. This answer is most commonly offered by patients who have completed a longer term course of treatment, usually for complex PTSD or early developmental trauma. I have found this relational unwinding can become the richest part of a patient's healing process. Successfully orchestrating an intentional final session, I think, is best done with ritual. Humans have used ritual as far back as 500,000 years ago. Paleolithic hunter gatherer societies and later Neolithic agricultural city states relied heavily on rituals to meaningfully demarcate birth, death, life transitions, spirituality, maintain social order, and transmit knowledge and values. Yet our modern world has largely withdrawn from using ritual to commemorate meaningful human and relational transitions. Buddhism has been all over the map when it comes to ritual. The historical Buddha was famous for delineating 10 fetters, which he viewed as primary obstacles to liberating mental and emotional afflictions. The third of the 10 fetters is believing that rites and rituals are an effective path for ending human suffering. And because of that false belief, one would forego the hard work of contemplative practice. This was the Buddha's antidote to what was then a common practice of paying a Brahmin priest to perform a ritual that would ostensibly purify or heal the supplicant. The Buddha was all about taking personal responsibility for the quality of one's mind and diligently acting from virtue, rather than paying someone to invoke the will of the Hindu pantheon of gods and goddesses. On the other hand, since the Buddha's death, Buddhism has been transformed by each country and culture that has adopted its teachings. Many of these countries, like Tibet, had long-standing animistic, shamanistic religious traditions in place. Many of these ancient rituals were fully integrated into Buddhist philosophy and contemplative practices in the form of deity worship, puja ceremonies, and elaborate ritual altars. So, though the historical Buddha saw ritual as an obstacle to awakening, rituals have well served 2,500 successive years of Buddhist practitioners in their pursuit of awakening. This is a great example of how two seemingly opposing views can exist side by side in service of the common good. So, what kind of ritual helps therapy end intentionally? I favor creating a meaningful transitional object the patient takes home. For those of you who may not know, a transitional object is something tangible, which represents where we have been or where we are, that is taken into the next stage or into a new environment. My final session for intentional ending has a lovely structure. I begin with inquiring once more if this indeed is the last session. Sometimes that question inspires a patient to launch wholeheartedly into a recounting of who they were at the onset of therapy and who they are now. It often ends up sounding like a greatest hits of transitional moments, awe moments, surprising changes, difficult times, and challenging acts we both remember. This shared reveling in a patient's courage and hard work naturally reiterates the mutual closeness and care that lives between us. It also opens the door to verbalizing the impending end and loss of the therapeutic container. Openly discussing this loss is a key aspect of an intentional ending. Courageously witnessing together an intentional letting go of therapeutic support and care should include reiterating its uselessness, because successful therapy means the patient is now capable of providing that care internally whenever they need it. Their healing has rendered the psychotherapist jobless, and that is the best possible outcome. As mentioned before, it can become apparent even during a final session that another session or two may be necessary to fully unwind the therapeutic container and therapeutic relationship. And that's just fine if needed. If not, I then lead us into the ritual for creating a transitional object. It's a fairly simple process. I have pre-prepared 2 round transparent stones and a small white transparent drawstring bag. I begin by asking the patient to come up with a word that, if they saw this word, it would best describe what they most received from this body of therapeutic work. I love this process because it reflects the patient's personality and tendencies. Some get that one word right away and have no doubt. Others can walk a circuitous path of words, finally arriving at the chosen one. When they have it, I use a marker and write the word on the first stone. Then I ask them to come up with a word that represents a wish they have for themselves as they go forward in their life. Finding that word often feels sparkly and joyful. And when they have it, I write that word on the second stone. The white transparent drawstring bag represents the therapeutic container. I place the stones in the bag, and holding it with one string, I offer the other string to the patient and ask them to close the bag when they are ready. That can take as much time as they need. It's a beautiful, relational, holding ending that they get to do for both of us. And it symbolizes closing the therapeutic container for both of us. Once the string is pulled, I hand my string and the bag to them. And while it's true, I spent my psychotherapeutic career in Silicon Valley seeing lots of brilliant engineers, scientists, and executive types, I can tell you this part of the intentional ending always included big smiles and nary a dry eye. And big thanks for having something meaningful and tangible to take home. So, what does a therapist do when a patient ghosts them or suddenly sends a termination email? Though rare, it has happened to me a few times since the pandemic, because patient safety is a psychotherapist's primary responsibility. If they are a no-show to a session, I insist they let me know that they are safe. That usually takes care of never hearing from them again and opens dialogue about any discomfort they may have had about openly discussing continuing or ending therapy. If I receive a termination email, I always reach back out. If the patient is in crisis or in need of continuing therapy but are unwilling to continue with me, I offer appropriate referrals. If they are stable, I offer a final session, making sure they understand the value of an intentional ending. If that is declined, I wish the patient well and assure them they can return at any time. It's not a full intentional ending, but it intentionally affirms their autonomy with great care. So my hope from doing this episode is that any clinician who hears this can be inspired to create their own intentional ending process and experience the tremendous joy of celebrating a patient's job well done.